are listening to a free version of the Majority Report with Sam Steeder. To support the show and get another 15 minutes of daily program, go to majority.fm, please.
The Majority Report with Sam Steeder.
It is Thursday, January 2nd, 2020. My name is Sam Steeder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program, welcome to 2020, folks. This year's going to be a real crap storm. Meanwhile, Pelosi and McConnell, their impeachment stalemate continues. But there are signs part of McConnell's support is beginning to crumble a little.
My firewall.
Meanwhile, we are 33 days until the Iowa caucus, ladies and gentlemen. Julian Castro is out as of today. Meanwhile, Bernie Sanders breaks fundraising records, smashes them. Speaking of smashing, Iraq cracking under Donald Trump's Iran policy. Thousands of U.S. troops are set to deploy to the region. Meanwhile, as Australia burns, a new study shows that it may be all of our futures, and worse. Trump pardons the would-be war criminal who busts out a new line of casual wear. Not the Onion. Cash bail ended for misdemeanors and nonviolent crimes. Evictions down in New York. Another belated thank you to Governor Cynthia Nixon. Federal judge strikes down North Carolina voter ID law as racially motivated. Meanwhile, immigration judges are leaving at double the rate under Trump than in past years. EPA advisors warn of its regulatory rollbacks. These are EPA advisors appointed by Trump who are worried about what we're doing at the EPA. Meanwhile, Bibi Netanyahu wants immunity from Israeli corruption charges. I wonder why. And 11,000 people with weed convictions have now been pardoned on the eve of full legalization in Illinois. All this and more on the first day of the Majority Report in the year 2020, arguably in a new decade. I don't want to get back into that argument. We can wait until January of, or I guess late December of 2020. I was just telling Brendan that I don't think I've ever had less of a sense of what things are going to look like a year from any other point than this in the 15 some odd years now that I've been doing this. I knew that Donald Trump had a 15% chance of winning against Hillary Clinton. I didn't think he would. But I did have a sense of if he won, what it would look like. And as I go through the potential scenarios of what could happen by the end of this year, Donald Trump wins. Bernie Sanders wins. Joe Biden wins. Elizabeth Warren wins. I really think those are probably the only real, possible potentialities. I mean, I guess it's conceivable, Pete Buttigieg. I also think it's conceivable. I don't think he would win, but that Mike Bloomberg runs in a third-party bid and causes one of the other things that we just talked about to happen. But in all of those scenarios, I still can't tell you what the situation's going to be on this date in 2021. If Donald Trump loses, I'm not convinced that he's not right now, a year from today, banking on the Supreme Court's case that is supposed to be heard in 3 days or something. That Bill Barr has been arguing, whatever it is, or that Joe Biden squeaks by in some fashion, or that Bernie Sanders is the president and it's just mayhem because, Mike Bloomberg is already threatening to sue or whatever it is. I really don't have a sense. This is going to be a crazy year, and we will do our best to at least keep you abreast of what's happening and give you a sense of where things are going.
And all of that will begin on the beginning of the second decade of the Majority Report. So that's a good pitch.
That is correct. I forgot about that. We will also be celebrating the 10th anniversary of this program, and it will happen. I can't even remember the date exactly, but we checked it out the other day. And by the other day, I mean like a month ago. I have no idea when things happen anymore. The 10th anniversary of this program will happen on Election Day in 2020. Between now and then, we will be doing, and because on that day, I'm anticipating, it's the 3rd, November 3rd. On that day, I'm anticipating we're going to do like a 12-hour show. I mean, I don't even know if we is really a fair thing to say because I don't know anybody else is going to show up here. But
some of us will have to vote at some point.
Yeah. But I'll be just sitting here babbling. Between now and then, we will be doing live coverage of, I don't know if we'll be able to do every single debate, but the vast majority of debates. We will do live coverage on specific nights during the primary. Like I suspect, I'm not sure about this, that we will be live on the for the Iowa primary, caucus. And I would imagine Super Tuesday is also going to be a big day. And we will be live during that. We will be live for at least 3 of the 4 debates that will take place in the next 2 months. The next debate is January 14th. It's Tuesday in Iowa. The Iowa caucus is February 3rd. Then there's a New Hampshire debate February 7th. I don't know. Maybe I'll shoot up there for that one. There's a Las Vegas debate on February 19th. Maybe I'll go to that one. I think the 25th may be tricky because I have a feeling that's during the kids' vacation, in which case, I don't know. I might be able to do it. Just call in. We'll do it that way. We'll figure out something. And then, of course, we're going to, at one point, I think, have an impeachment trial in the Senate. And here's what's happening in terms of impeachment. We'll play the Biden in a bit. So we're anticipating an impeachment trial in the Senate. Nobody's quite clear on when this is going to happen because Pelosi has been holding back the articles of impeachment, has yet to send them to the Senate. We're in one of those areas where no one really knows what this means. Right? I mean, Noah Feldman, one of the constitutional lawyers or professors who testified in front of the House for impeachment proceedings, has written that if Pelosi doesn't send them to the Senate, he's not technically impeached yet. That is a requirement. That may be the case. I don't think that's, terribly relevant. Frankly, because as far as the country is concerned, he's impeached. As far as he's concerned, he's impeached. Nobody anticipates that he's going to be convicted in the Senate. But the question is how much pain is going to be exacted politically, and who's going to suffer that pain? It has been my contention for a while that that pain is going to be felt by a half a dozen, maybe more, Republican senators up for re-election. That this puts them in a very tenuous position because they don't want to be seen as going against Donald Trump because the Republican Party loves Donald Trump. The Republican Party is Donald Trump. But they're also running in states where nearly half the population, maybe sometimes more, maybe sometimes a little less, don't want their senator to be so chummy with Donald Trump. And this vote, if you wanted to argue as a challenger running against one of these senators that that senator is in league with Donald Trump, there couldn't be a greater gift than one vote that says, I support maintaining Donald Trump and don't think he's done anything wrong, or I think he did something wrong. Like that one vote sums up, because, you know, not everybody has time to sort of wade through all this stuff. That's one vote that can sum it up. Are you protecting Donald Trump? Or are you allowing him to be subject to justice? How do we know? How can we measure where this is from the perspective of these politicians? Well, we can look at some of the more vulnerable or politicians whose career is and power is wrapped up in being at least at arm's length from Donald Trump on the Republican side. And we can look on the Democratic side and see, what are those Democrats doing in places where Donald Trump is rather popular? What do they feel they can get away with? Now, maybe these politicians don't know what's going on whatsoever, but we look at the polls. The polls have basically been static. Donald Trump's approval rating, I think, is like, on average, is more or less at the same, maybe slightly higher at this time of year. But it jumps around. It's jumped around throughout his entire period of his presidency. We can look at where impeachment stands. Maybe its popularity is down a point or two, but it jumps around. So here is, let's start with Lisa Murkowski. I don't think she's worried about a challenge, but her brand is trying to maintain some semblance of being above it all. She's probably the only one. Well, it's her and Susan Collins. Susan Collins really pretends. Murkowski, to a certain extent, remember, she won in a write-in vote. She lost her Republican primary last time around, if I'm not mistaken. And so let's take that temperature on where we stand in terms of impeachment in the Senate as far as the Republicans are concerned.
Demanding the trial process be fair, but there are questions about impartiality. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has said there will be total coordination with the Senate and the White House counsel's office.
And in fairness, when I heard that, I was disturbed.
Murkowski says while this isn't a criminal trial, the Senate is still required to do impartial justice under the Constitution.
To me, it means that we have to take that step back from being hand in glove with the defense. And so I heard what Leader McConnell had said. I happen to think that that has further confused the process.
The senator undecided how she'll vote until she's heard the evidence.
For me to prejudge and say there's nothing there, or on the other hand, he should be impeached yesterday, that's wrong. In my view, that's wrong.
As she calls for a process that is fair and full, and her vote could be key in ensuring that happens. She is seen as one of three swing Republicans, and she embraces her image of independence.
If it means that I am viewed as one who looks openly and critically at every issue in front of me rather than acting as a rubber stamp for my party or my president, I'm totally good with that. I am totally good with that.
Now, why is Lisa Murkowski so good with that? it's because she has a deep reservoir of integrity. No, it's because she's a politician and she has a sense of what's going to work in the context of her state. She is not so worried about being primaried. And as you get closer to the date when most of the filing deadlines end, that's early March, you're going to see a little bit more distance put in there relative to how much distance each of these politicians think they have to maintain. Susan Collins is also walking a tightrope. She came out and said, do we have audio of this? Here it is.
As well. Then we move to what I call the third stage. At that point, we debated whether or not we wanted to hear from witnesses and get additional documents. And there was a roll call vote with Republicans wanting witnesses at that point.
Pause it for 1 second.
And Democrats.
This is she's recounting the Clinton impeachment. Go ahead.
Few exceptions, not wanting witnesses. So we have a reverse of the current situation. And we decided to call just 3 witnesses and to have them deposed rather than testifying live.
Should Mr. Mulvaney, the acting chief of staff, and John Bolton be people that should be called to testify, given their firsthand knowledge of this alleged quid pro quo, which the president hates, but that's what it was, on arms for an investigation deal?
I am open to witnesses. I think it's premature to decide who should be called until we see the evidence that is presented and get the answers to the questions that we senators can submit through the Chief Justice to both sides. What I don't understand is why the House, having issued subpoenas to Secretary Pompeo, for example, did not seek to enforce those subpoenas in court.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, it's not exactly accurate. We know that the House is pursuing subpoenas on 1 or 2 of these individuals that theoretically will set a precedent and force others to do so. But there's Susan Collins also hedging. And lastly, do we have a tear sheet from that? Doug Jones, who is the senator from Alabama, Democrat, who everybody presumes is going to lose because Democrats shouldn't be winning in Alabama based upon what we know of the makeup there. He went out on a limb too. Now, both of those Republicans, tiny limb. These are short stubs, but they're going out on a limb a little bit because they need to. Here's Doug Jones going out on a limb too because he knows that he needs to maintain his Democratic support. And he's calculating that there's room enough for him to do this even with the Republicans in Alabama. And all of this, the point of this is essentially to make the argument of where the politicians think they need to be on impeachment. And it gives you a sense of just where impeachment lands in terms of the import for each party's base. Doug Jones knows that he cannot win in Alabama without the support of every Democrat, enthused Democrat in Alabama. And he knows he has to come out and be supportive of a full-on process in the Senate, which is what the Republicans do not want. Lindsey Graham, despite what he said during the Clinton's impeachment, I want this to be over soon. Mitch McConnell, doesn't matter. We're hand in glove with the president. We're just going to wrap this up as soon as we can. These are guys who are terrified of their base in South Carolina and Kentucky. Lindsey Graham is looking at it both ways. He has a legit Democratic challenger in South Carolina now. And so he knows he needs every Republican to support him. So he's coming out strong against impeachment. Doug Jones knows he needs every Democrat to support him, so he's coming out and saying we need to have a longer process. Even Joe Manchin is saying that. So that's where we are in terms of impeachment. Of course, also, let's check in and see what Donald Trump says about impeachment. Here he is at a New Year's soiree. And at,
so glamorous.
At Mar-a-Lago, Florida. Here it is.
Doesn't matter. As far as I'm concerned, I'd be very happy with the trial because we did nothing wrong. We didn't even have a witness, and we won 196 to nothing. Okay, we didn't have a witness. That was all the Democrats' witness. Look, Adam Schiff is a corrupt politician. He's corrupt. He got up, he made a speech, said something I never said.
Now, I know what you're saying. What's the 196 to 0? We've done some sleuthing, and 196 to 0, there was 195 Republicans who voted to not impeach Donald Trump. Now, of course, Justin Amash was kicked out of the Republican Party because he wanted to impeach Donald Trump. So he doesn't count. And then there were 3 Democrats who voted against impeachment. 3 on one article, 2 on the other. But he's including Jeff Van Drew as a Republican because he had switched to being a Republican after the fact. So he's taking that as 196. That's what that is. And the not one witness, I don't know what he's talking about. There were multiple witnesses that could be called by the Republicans, except for all those Republicans refused to show up because at Donald Trump's behest. So, but there he is. I am very happy that his New Year's was spent worried about the impeachment. So there it is.
I hope they make 196 to 0 T-shirts on the campaign trail, the way they did the
read the transcript.
I mean, it'd be nice if some Democrats counted Republican votes like that.
Yeah.
What's that? Oh, yeah, we
don't even count them.
Yeah, we just don't even. Sorry, folks. Republicans they had zero votes. We didn't count the Republican votes.
They are Republicans.
So let's turn to the other sort of obviously big story of 2020. That will be the Democratic primary. There are some videos of Joe Biden going around online right now that have been that I think have been sort of cut in such a way that are unfair to Joe Biden. One of him about him talking about European culture in relationship to abuse of women. And it's trying to make it seem like, I don't know, that he's being a white supremacist. And I think that's, and that video, I think it's wrong to interpret that video. I mean, I think it's fine to go back and look at, why he was so comfortable with segregationists and against all that stuff throughout the ages. But that video is not it. There's another video of him out there, I think, where he's talking about cuts to Medicare and Social Security. And I think it's also cut in sort of a slightly misleading way. All I can tell you is that, yes, of course, Joe Biden, his career was built on those notions of austerity. In fact, he was the one who tried to promote that deal under the Obama administration to cut Social Security. That's simply a fact. He was also the one who left the Republicans off the hook during the fiscal cliff. He undercut Harry Reid. Go read Ryan Grimm's book, We Got People, on some of the details of that. But there's this other video out there where Joe Biden says he's open to a Republican vice president. Now, that's a very glib way to characterize this video. In some respects, I would say that when you see it in context, it's worse. Now, this is going to be a long clip, but you'll see where he meanders to. And let me just give you an alternate. Let's just do this for the sake of, because people, some people are going to be like, well, what did you expect him to say? Matt, ask me, would I be open Now, of course, I'm not running for president. I may primary Chuck Schumer, but I'm not going to run for president. Even if I become senator, I'm not going to run for president. So don't ask me.
You're ruling it out already.
I'm ruling it out. I'm only going to do one term as senator. All right. Ask me, would I choose a Republican?
Sam, would you choose a Republican running mate?
Look, I'm not going to say no to any type of people about who I would pick, but I can tell you the Republican Party stands for fundamentally different ideas than I have. And I can't imagine there's anybody out there who calls himself a Republican now who would be simpatico with my politics. That doesn't mean that I hate them. That doesn't mean that I can't work with them. Doesn't mean that I don't respect them. But frankly, the Republican Party, if I wanted to pick a Republican, I'd be running as a Republican. That's the way you do it. If you want to show your respect for Republican voters because you don't want to shut them off, that's the way you do it. They're going to respect that. You could even take it even further. Well, you know what? I believe in what some would call conservative values. Like we should be helping people. You do that type of like word game. But he doesn't. He doesn't do that. And because I think he is still... Remember, this is a guy who campaigned for a Republican congressman in Michigan. Fred Upton. This is a guy who has been really explicit. Now, either he takes it as... this is a guy who says that without Donald Trump, I'm going to be able to deal with these guys. There's either a legit delusion here or not. But towards the end of this, in fact, the final words he says in this long clip, I think, give you a sense of why he feels he can do business with Republicans.
If you are the nominee, as she suggested over there, you're going to have to pull out all the stops. Our 21-year-old son said the other night, I wonder if Joe Biden would consider choosing a Republican as a running mate.
The answer is I would, but I can't think of one now. No. Look here. No, I'm serious. No, here's what I mean. Let me explain that. There's some really decent Republicans that are out there still. But here's the problem right now of the well-known ones. They've got to step up. Do you know what I mean?
All right, pause it for 1 second. Let me tell you what Rush Limbaugh does and what all the right-wing talkers do that we on the left were never sort of like able to really pull off, which is whenever Republicans disappoint them, whenever they don't do what they want them to do, they say they're afraid. They've been browbeaten. They're cowardly. Sometimes they'll go that far. They're cowardly. They're weak. They never say they're corporatist or they're too socialistic or they're too flim-flamsy or whatever it is. It's always that they are afraid. And that is the exact same frame that Biden's doing. And why do you use that frame? Because you make it about it's not them, it's the context in which they're dealing with. So that they're ultimately redeemable. Now, of course, are these people redeemable as human beings? I don't know. Maybe God will say, like, when you get to the pearly gates, if there's a God, he'll say whatever. I don't know. But politically, how do you square that circle? It's not just that we're at a time of like partisan rancor. We're at a time of ideological real divides. It's real. These divides are real. We have material, real problems in this country. You see reports that we could solve, we could couldn't solve our climate crisis, but we could make a huge dent in it for $300 billion if we spent it tomorrow. And you've got, 3 or 4 men in this country who have that much money just in their bank or in their assets. that the top, what is it? I don't know, a couple hundred billionaires in the country, got a $1.5 trillion. I mean, there's some real material differences here, but continue.
I'm not being a wise guy, but there are a lot of people. By the way, it's presumptuous of me. I'm going to get clobbered by the press. Biden's talking about vice presidential candidates. He doesn't have the nomination, which is totally legitimate, okay? But there are an awful lot of people
That's not it.
Who are qualified to be. The only thing I know about is the qualifications for vice president. And by that I mean no president can, by him or herself, handle the job all themselves any longer. It's too big. And so one of the things that I worked out we worked out, Barack and I, is that when he gave me responsibility, he gave me total presidential authority. I could hire people, I could fire people, I could pick anyone from administration to work with me. I had complete control, not a joke. And the reason he was confident in doing that is, first of all, nobody wondered whether or not he couldn't do it. That's because it's a hard thing for a person to give somebody significant responsibility, like doing the Recovery Act, for example. It's $900 billion, and then it pointed out that less than 0.2% fraud or waste occurred, and that person gets a lot of credit, in this case me. Well, it takes a president to be able to
Pause it for 1 second. I'm not going to let that slide. First of all, it was closer to $800 billion in the Recovery Act. 2/3 of which were tax cuts. I don't know what kind of fraud and waste you're going to get in the tax cuts. But remember Mr. Train Joe? Has anybody seen all the new high-speed trains that we have that came out of the Recovery Act? Because I haven't. Now, I think it's wrong that he gets that everybody gives him credit for it. That's the first I've heard of it. But if he wants the credit for all those shovel-ready jobs that didn't happen, you can have it. If he wants the credit for the fact that was about $500 billion short from what we needed, that we had a protracted recovery, that we had immiseration in terms of the housing sector, that, in fact, it was so bad that we elected Donald Trump. And even if you want to say it shouldn't have been that, it was a half a dozen other things. It shouldn't have been that close. The reason why it was that close was because of the failures of what this guy wants credit for. But go ahead.
And that person gets a lot of credit, in this case me. Well, it takes a president to be able to have the confidence that that's not going to diminish them in any way. And secondly, it requires you to be simpatico with your vice president. Not just like them, not just trust them, but make sure they're in the same exact wavelength politically.
Now, I want to know what Republican is in the same exact wavelength of Joe Biden. Like, how is that even possible? That's the problem with that statement. It's that Joe Biden does not see himself as fundamentally different from a quality Republican. That's the problem with that statement. Not that he's completely has a tin ear as to what the lay of the land is. That is problematic. Tin ear as to what the politics of that comment is. A tin ear as to the efficacy of the Recovery Act. Now, yes, I think it did stop us from descending into a genuine depression. But there's no economist now who doesn't say that look, it was insufficient. And there were plenty at the time who were saying it was insufficient. Paul Krugman was writing on the Times. It wasn't like this was all in the back pages of the Baffler magazine. But in the end, now you could say, well, he was rambling. He had no idea where he was. And so he sort of looped around because he was trying to, at one point, he was trying to make it well, Obama trusted me so much that he gave me all the work. So he knew I was competent. But the other thing is we were very simpatico in terms of our politics. That's what you need for a vice president. So, yes, I would appoint a Republican. I can't name a specific one. But what generic, theoretical, hypothetical Republican exists that Joe Biden feels so close to? That's what should worry you about this moment. Because Joe Biden, in his mind, is a Republican from 1993. And I would remind you that it was Republican politics in 1993 that led to the politics of today. Things like austerity, things like cutting Social Security, things like cutting Medicare, things like rolling back regulations on the EPA, things like the idea that government's too big, that government's too clumsy, that government can't do anything. Things like tax cuts are always the answer. Things like wealth inequality is not that big of a deal. That's the problem with Joe Biden. It's not that he would consider a Republican or even that he would use that rhetoric. It's that he perceives himself as being politically simpatico. Is that what he said? Is that the words he used at the end? With a hypothetical Republican. Well, I want to know who is this hypothetical Republican that we as Democratic voters would be happy with as our first choice, as our nominee. That's the problem with Joe Biden's comments. That's the real problem with Joe Biden's, I'd pick a Republican VP, or I'd be willing to. That dude scares me. He scares me because I think he would lose to Donald Trump, or certainly could, has a higher chance of losing. And he scares me because he has a chance of winning, frankly. Now, I would rather him win than lose, obviously, but you know, at one point, we're going to have to get off this merry-go-round. And it's not going to happen by going back to where we were just before Donald Trump, because that's what led to Donald Trump. And frankly, one of my biggest fears about a Donald Trump presidency would be that we would go right back, if not further, back in time in terms of politics, because that's a natural reaction for people. While we're talking about 2020, obviously mentioned up front, Julian Castro left the race today. I have to say that he left the race. I was more of a fan of him after he left the race than when he entered.
Because I don't think any of us were especially big fans of his before he entered the race. Yeah. Right.
Now, to be fair, part of that was because, was it his brother that spoke at the 2012 Democratic convention? I think it was his brother, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it was Julian Castro.
It was Julian.
Yeah.
That speech that he gave, I was not happy with. There was a lot of like pull yourself up with your bootstraps type of quality. Like if you are lucky enough to have an abuelita like I did, then you're in good shape. Otherwise, you're SOL. And I found that a little bit problematic. But, you know, he was pushing good policies as a candidate. And I would have much rathered him be further along in the race than someone like Amy Klobuchar, let's say, in terms of bringing in new ideas, telling us what we can't do. Here is Andrew Yang, who has opened the door to what we can do. One of those things is give everybody $1,000 a month and give people who are relying on the social safety net the choice. You can either take what benefits you're getting now, which are more often than not insufficient, and get slightly more on a monthly basis. Of course, relative to everyone else in society, you will not be making up for those deficits that you are dealing with. But it's a theory. And in theory, I don't have a problem with the government handing out money to people on a regular basis, but it should be on top of any other type of services that we're giving now at the very least. And so here he is, Andrew Yang. Oh, the other thing that he has an interesting take on is Medicare for All. Medicare for All is the name of a bill in the Senate introduced by Bernie Sanders. It is also the name of a bill in the House introduced by Pramila Jayapal. Medicare for All is not literally Medicare for all. It is a derivation of what Medicare is. It's closer in many respects to Medicaid for all. But it is a specific bill that has specific benefits that it's offered. There's a specific plan in passing it, a phase-in plan. There's a lot of specifics behind this. All of the funding is not necessarily there, but no bill is introduced with all of its funding. Everybody has a plan to fund it. It's a very specific thing. That is a problem, apparently, for Andrew Yang, because he wants it to mean something different, because apparently he knows how it lands on people's ears. I'm going to play this after, but I'll also play it this way.
And you, sir, you're a pretender.
Here's Andrew Yang on ABC's This Week trying to pretend. I mean, look, if you don't support it, don't support it. Joe Biden doesn't. Pete Buttigieg doesn't. They're pretty explicit about it. Andrew Yang doesn't want to be as explicit about it. I wonder why.
Okay, I want to turn to your health care plan, because you've just released a new health care plan, and I'm a little bit confused about where you stand. First, I want to play clips from 2 of your ads where you talk about health care.
We need to move towards a Medicare for all system where every American has access to quality and affordable services.
His ideas are a blueprint for a new way forward. A healthcare system with Medicare for all.
But I've looked at your health care plan. In fact, I've got it right here. And this plan does not call for Medicare for all. In fact, it doesn't even have a public option. So why the dissonance here?
We need to move towards universal health care that's high quality and nearly cost-free for Americans around the country. But reality is we have millions of Americans who are on private insurance right now, and taking those plans away from them very quickly would be untenable for many, many Americans. To me, the goal of the government has to be to demonstrate that we can outcompete private plans and then push them out of the market over time. And that's what we're proposing.
But I'm confused. Your ad is explicit. Your ad says Medicare for all. Your plan is not Medicare for all. It's not even Medicare for some, because in your plan there's not even a public option.
Our plan is to expand a universal health care system to all Americans. Medicare for all is not the name of a bill. Medicare for all is universal health care for all Americans.
But Medicare for all is Medicare for all, right? I mean...
Well, our health care plan would be based on Medicare and expanding it over time to more and more Americans. You lower the eligibility age and then you make it widely accessible.
Okay, I didn't see that in your plan, but I want to move forward to the question of your.
Okay, now. I guess Jonathan Carl does not realize that, Medicare for all is Medicare for all. There's actually is an explicit bill. Like, there's a number. I can't remember what it is. 481 or something. I can't remember. In the Senate and the House. There are explicit bills. So he's wrong. Or he's lying. And just listen to, if it even sounds like Medicare for all. On his campaign site, under a heading called Medicare for All, he has controlled the cost of life-saving prescription drugs through negotiating drug prices, using international reference pricing, forced licensing, public manufacturing facilities, and importation. So I don't know exactly. I mean, some of those things work. It's unclear for me on whose behalf he's negotiating. right? Like, are you negotiating just on the existing Medicare? It's unclear. Number 2, invest in technologies to make health services function efficiently and reduce waste. All right, so get rid of waste in the system. But again, what system are you talking about? Is he saying that, like, when we invest in technologies, are we going to give those to the hospitals? In other words, are we going to spend tax dollars to make hospitals more efficient to increase their profit margin? Like, how do we get that money back that we invest? Like, how do we get the return on that investment? Then he also says, change the incentive structure by offering flexibility to providers, prioritizing patients over paperwork, and increasing the supply of practitioners. How do we, like, who does that? How do we increase the supply of practitioners? Do we just roll back regulations saying, like, just pre-med, you're a doctor? Or how does that work? Like through what mechanism do we, or whoever we are, touch the medical service? I mean, the medical industry. We do it in many different ways. We do it through Medicaid. We do it through Medicare. We do it through patenting of drugs. But none of this is specific. Shift our focus in educating ourselves in preventative care and end-of-life care options. In other words, wellness. Try and convince people to get more involved in wellness. Great idea. The ACA offered a lot of incentives for that. And guess what? Didn't work. The ACA has a bunch of that stuff. Ensure crucial aspects of well-being, including mental health, care for people with disabilities, HIV, AIDS detection, treatment, reproductive health, maternal care, dental, and vision are addressed and integrated into comprehensive care for the 21st century. Folks, I got to tell you something. That doesn't say anything. How do we ensure that? These are just like broad, like these aren't even ideas. They're
like
just
a
sort
Christmas
of
list.
It's not even as specific as a Christmas list. It's like, what do you want for Christmas? Really good stuff. Anything specific? Yeah, super good stuff. Overtime. I would like to get good stuff for Christmas. And then last is diminish the influence of lobbyists and special interests in the healthcare industry that makes it nearly impossible to draft and pass me. How do we diminish the influence of lobbyists? You cannot diminish the influence of lobbyists. You can only diminish the power to lobby or the potential rewards of lobbying. And the only way you can do that is to cut them out of this business or to cut their revenue so significantly they don't have the ability to pay for lobbyists who will handle anything down the middle. On top of which, on his website, which, of course, I think if anybody who knows this program at all, move away from defensive medicine. Doctors operate under constant threat of malpractice lawsuits. These cases are only decided by a verdict 5% of the time, and when they are, they land in the doctor's favor 80% of the time. Well, the reason why is because 95% of the time, doctors realize, or hospitals are like, they effed up, and so they settle. Despite the fact that doctors are almost always exonerated, malpractice suits can take years. As a result, doctors prescribe needless procedures and tests to avoid being sued. Look, all this work has already been done. We know that rolling back in malpractice reform didn't do anything for insurance rates or doctors' behaviors. We know that. Check. There's plenty of research in terms of Texas. There's other states. Go back and look at Atul Gawande's seminal piece about 2 different towns in Texas and their Medicare reimbursement rates. The fact of the matter is that doctors prescribe procedures when they own the mechanism to perform those procedures. If I have a hammer and a saw as opposed to just a screwdriver, then every time somebody comes to see me, I'm going to use those hammers and saws. But there is Andrew Yang. And, when you combine that with, and I'm still stuck on him being on Dave Rubin's show and basically saying, like, this is a way for us to, his freedom dividend back in the day, this is a way for us to eventually get rid of the social welfare state. Because he's going to force people to choose, do you want your $850 worth of benefits a month, or do you want $1,000 worth of benefits a month? When we know that the $850, and these are hypothetical numbers, not his, but mine, is insufficient. And frankly, also, maybe it's insufficient, but at least relative to the context around them, it's a benefit that helps, relatively speaking, right? I mean,
you have to choose between SSDI and Yang bucks, but you don't have to choose between your mortgage deduction and Yang bucks.
Right. And here's the bottom line, though, is like the idea that relativity in terms of money is irrelevant seems foolish to me. And I understand UBI has worked in, controlled environments, in limited environments. And I do think there's something to it. And I think it's definitely worth trying. But to use it as a mechanism to roll back the welfare state, if you want to call it that, I think it's very dangerous. I mean, well, but that, I mean, look, if the guy's not supportive of Medicare for all and just has this sort of like, I don't even know what this plan is. I mean, honestly, I couldn't pull a single thing out of that was substantive in any way. It's all great ideas, but it is like, what do you want for Christmas? Really great stuff. Overtime. Not all at once. I couldn't handle that. It's time to get real, folks. Clown time is over. If you want, if you are supportive of Andrew Yang because you perceive him as having progressive ideals, I mean, I can understand if you're a libertarian and you're supportive of Yang, some level. I mean, at least it's consistent.
Has anybody asked him in a debate yet, like, what sort of regulations he would put in place to control against prices just going up as a result of everyone having $1,000 more a month?
I mean, that, I think, you could ask him the same question about 1 through 5 of these things. Yeah. Like, how do you control the cost of life-saving prescription drugs? Through negotiating drug prices with whom? On whose behalf? Like Medicare? Why wasn't even use the word? Invest in technologies. Like, okay, so the United States government invests in technologies for telehealth and for modernizing who gets the benefit of that? Like, where's the guarantee these hospitals are going to go like, we just saved, whatever it is, $10 million this year on inefficiencies. We should give that back to the patients.
I had a lot of arguments 6 months ago with Yang supporters, and they would always mention, well, he also supports Medicare for all. We now know, conclusively he doesn't. And I also mentioned housing stuff, and I'm looking at his housing, and it's all about zoning laws and the sort of anti-NIMBY which is fine, I guess.
Right.
But, that's not going to change landlords from...
maybe necessary, but insufficient.
Exactly.
Lastly, the other big story over the past couple of weeks, I should start with, there was So meanwhile, Donald Trump's Iran maximize pressure. Well, some people are saying it's not even a strategy. It just seems to be a goal, like an end goal in and of itself, right? Like usually in foreign policy, what you do is you do things because you want some type of outcome, a specific type of outcome. And it appears that Donald Trump's Iran policy is literally just I guess it's war hawk virtue signaling. And that's the ends. We just want to make it clear that we don't like Iran. And therefore, we'll get more from Saudi Arabia and I guess support. We can show that we support Israel. And so ultimately, Trump keeps making these red lines, and Iran keeps basically saying, like, you don't have the juice to back this stuff up. And we should say that there are protests in Iran because sanctions have been reimposed, and the Iranian people are suffering. Meanwhile, in Iraq, an Iranian-backed Iraqi militia, and for those of us who we're talking about the war 15 years ago, it was quite clear what was going to happen, and that Iran was going to gain the upper hand in Iraq, just because of the predominance of Shia versus Sunni there, and because they were already well positioned, and that's what's happened. The Kataib Hezbollah fired on an Iraqi military base in Iraq. 4 U.S. servicemen were wounded, and an American contractor was killed. That was about, almost 2 weeks ago. Sunday, that would have been this past Sunday, U.S. launched airstrikes against that same militia's forces in Iraq and Syria, killed 24 people, wounded about 50. And then in response to that, 2 days ago, thousands of supporters of the Kataib and Hezbollah and other pro-Iranian militias stormed the U.S. embassy in Baghdad. They have since, by Wednesday, the protests were less violent. As of today, my understanding is the U.S. Embassy is secured. Remember, the embassy there is massive. And now the U.S. is deploying, I think, another 4,000 troops to the region. I guess they go to Kuwait, and I don't know how many come in. Maybe 750 go to the embassy. It's unclear to me. But this is another example of the failure of Donald Trump's foreign policy. Which is not to say that it wasn't, look, a lot of this stuff is preordained with George Bush. But one of the best things that Barack Obama did as president was to forge a deal with Iran and begin to bring them into the international community. There's still a lot of problems with Iran. Still a proxy war between them and Saudi Arabia. But it was a start in the right direction. That's been unwound now. Here is Steve Doocy on Fox and Friends. Well, places. Talking to Michael Waltz. He's a representative from Florida to praise Iran for the strategy. Now, of course, this guy, I imagine he is in a part of Florida where there might be, sort of some deep-held pro-Israel sentiments, and maybe that's what this is about. But it's also just sort of the posturing. Here we go.
The sound bites that we played earlier, where members of the media have portrayed this essentially as Trump's fault, the reaction to what we have seen over at the embassy in Baghdad. Others have suggested the Politico headline is Trump tries to avoid his own Benghazi. Do you see parallels between what happened in Baghdad over the last 48 hours and Benghazi?
No, I don't, actually. The only parallel is that it's an embassy. There are parallels, I think, with what Iran has traditionally tried to do in 1979 when it stormed our embassy in Tehran and was, what did we do? We were feckless back then. We didn't meet it with strength. We met it with strength this time, and Iran has backed down and its proxies have backed down. Now, what they're going to try to do is work through the Iraqi parliament to get us removed from Iraq. That's their ultimate goal. But at the end of the day, they want to dominate the region. The regime is desperate. Mr. President, the maximum pressure campaign is working. Stay strong. And at the end of the day, the regime will either have to come back to the negotiating table from a position of weakness, or it will face internal economic collapse. So what we're doing overall strategically is working, and this is how they're going to lash out.
All right, let's see what happens next. Colonel?
All right.
Congressman? Sir, thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Steve.
Yeah. Now, what is the ultimate, like what we're doing strategically, but there's no end goal to this, right? Like, there's like, what is that? What they're going to come back to the negotiation table and do what? Agree to stop their nuclear weapons program? Or they're going to just completely roll back everything and cede the entire region to Saudi Arabia. Is that what's supposedly going to happen? Because we have no example of regimes who are ruling over people who are in desperate straits, right? Like that, we have no example of that with that we've seen that Donald Trump has been maybe playing footsie with, like North Korea. I mean, it's just absurd. But that's where we're at.
It's all going according to plan.
Yes. Look at that. I'm tough on Iran. All right, folks. Going to take a quick break and head into the fun half. Just a reminder, this program in 2020, as it did in 2019, relies on your support. You can become a member and support this program at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, we give you extra content every day. We give you the free show commercial free. And, well, you help this program, reach other people. We're going to try and do maybe a little bit of marketing this year. See if we can't expand our reach. I don't know.
Will we be using Mike Cernovich again?
I'm going to ask Mike Cernovich to pitch in. We'll see. I'm not sure. But your support makes it all possible. JoinTheMajorityReport.com. Also, AM Quickie, still quicking it up in the morning. You can listen to top news briefs, and it's all free. You can access it via the app. You can go to MajorityApp.com. You can hear the Majority Report, Daily Majority Report, and the Daily AM Quickie. It's there. It's one of the tabs. Or you can just sign up directly at amquickie.com. What else did we have? That's about it. Don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code Majority, get 10% off. TMBS is Friday this week.
Yep, tomorrow night.
Assuming Michael's back from his vacation.
I think he will be.
His extended vacation. You can check that out at patreon.com/TMBS. Of course, Jamie's The Intifada. You can check it out at patreon.com/The Intifada. And Matt, what's happening with Literary Hangover 2020?
Yeah, well, we released The Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan, a very, very popular old fable. And we'll be doing The Sotweed Factor by Ebenezer Cook. And then we'll be talking about Bacon's Rebellion coming up. You know much about Bacon's Rebellion?
It sounds familiar to me.
It's very interesting. I wouldn't want to summarize it yet because I haven't done all the research, but interesting stuff.
Where did it take place?
In Virginia and Maryland.
Okay, no, I only know all the rebellions that took place in Massachusetts, like Shays Rebellion.
Oh yeah,
it's a much more interesting rebellion, frankly.
Than Bacon's?
It's pretty interesting.
Bacon's is pretty interesting. I don't know. We'll litigate that on Literary Hangover. Patreon.com/Literary Hangover.
There we go. We'll wait. I'll wait for the Shays Rebellion episode.
That'll be the first one you listen to.
You let me know when that happens. 646-257-3920 is the number. See you in the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous. You're a little bit upset. You're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
That's a good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2, 5 eighths, 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Ooh.
Rand Paul. I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
I think I might be a Nazi.
Agreed.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me...
Hey, shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.